The quantum world tells us that we live and we are a sea of information. Hopi view of the world, and I think many people know this, as well as other native traditions, not only Hopi, there is a sense of harmony and beauty in the world. They know everything is connected, everything is alive, everything is conscious. The rock is conscious, the tree is conscious, the animals are conscious, the sky. What the science of hope theory tells us is that it's good to have the intention, but it's not enough to have only the intention. To stack the deck of success and our failure, we need to have a strategy that allows our intention to come to fruition. Where's the boundary? Where the field ends and we begin. And the moment you draw that boundary, you fall into the ancient trap that keeps us separate, that keeps us powerless, because it leads us to feel and tells us that we are not part of that field. And the reality is that we are the field. Every atom of our body, your body, my body, our viewers right now, the atoms that make up the molecules of our body right now, they are emerging from that field, some of them, and some are collapsing back into that field. There's this constant dance. My fans know a little bit about my history. I come from a very dysfunctional family, an unhealthy, dysfunctional, abusive, alcoholic family. My father was the abuser. My mom, my younger brother, and I got the bad end of that deal. And music was one of the first forms of refuge for me, Alec. And I know many of our viewers can really relate to that. We find ourselves going to music to help us to feel differently in the presence of our life experience and our joy as well as our pain. We know that as adults, but when you're a kid, you don't always know all the mechanisms. You just know you feel better when you're in that music. Well, for me, this was back in the 1960s when a new form of music was emerging. It was certainly new at the time. And I'll just tell you, I had two experiences that I'll relate to you that had a direct impact on my life and actually helped me to focus on where my life is today. The first of those, I went to see a Jefferson Airplane concert in 1968. I'll tell you exactly where it was. Everybody is watching from Kansas City, Missouri. It was Memorial Hall in Kansas City, Kansas, right across the state line. I sat in the front row. I proclaimed my love for Grace Slick. I sat there and said, "Grace, I love you, I love you." And she completely ignored me, completely discounted my love for her. But here's what happened. In that hall, I watched about, at that time, it was 30, maybe 40,000 people. And they were moved by the sound of what they were hearing. They were moved by the music. They were moved by the lyrics that were expressing what we were feeling at that time. 1968, a lot of turbulence, not unlike what we're seeing today. There was racial turbulence. There was conflict, the Vietnam War. It was a very intense time, and the music helped people to move that energy. And so I saw those people moved by the music. But here's the thing, Alec, when the music stopped and we walked out of the hall, the feeling stopped as well. And people needed something outside of themselves to create that feeling again. They needed to buy an album, or in that time, people were using 8-track tapes in the late 60s and early 70s. I don't know if they were there exactly 1968. The point is they needed something outside of their bodies. Now, at the same time, I saw something else. Now, I'm not going to say that the message necessarily, I was on board with the message, but I went to see a man named Billy Graham, an evangelical speaker, speaking in an outdoor arena to 70,000 people. And he had no band behind him, no music, but he had words. And the words that he spoke meant something to the people that were in that stadium. And here's the difference. When we left the stadium, something had changed within the people that heard those words, and they began to think of themselves differently, and they didn't need something external to their experience. They didn't need to go buy an album, or they didn't need to buy, a tape or even a book, because they heard something from Billy Graham that changed the way they felt about themselves and their relationship to the world, and the change stayed with them. Those two experiences to me, at an early age in my life, I knew that I wanted to contribute to the world in some way, and I didn't know the best way to do that. I didn't know if it would be through a spoken word, a written word, or through music. So I was in bands from the time illegally playing in bars from the time that I was 14 years old. And I enjoyed playing the music, but I didn't like the music lifestyle, to be honest. I loved the music, but what was happening in the musicians' lives during that time in the 1960s, it was just absolutely crazy. And the easiest thing was to be on the stage playing music. The hardest thing was keeping everybody's life together long enough to get onto the stage. So I chose music as a hobby rather than a profession. And I began exploring the power of words. What could I say? What could I share to my community that would honor their relationship to themselves, their relationship to their bodies, to the earth, to the future, to the past, to God, to the cosmos, and help my friends, my family, my community, help them to navigate the changes that we find at our doorstep in a world of extremes. And we're living extremes right now. In some ways, today doesn't look much different than 1968. So music has played a powerful role in my life. Alec, I'm a guitar player. I continue to play. I collect guitars. Some people are surprised. I have played at a couple of our events, and they think I'm going to play some kind of soft kumbaya folk music. And I've got a beautiful Jimi Hendrix signature edition reverse headstock Fender, black Fender guitar. And I love to wail and shred on that guitar because my soul feels good. But I also do a lot of singer-songwriter. I'm actually in the studio now creating a new, I won't call it an album, I'll call it an EP. Probably 5 songs, 2 covers and 3 originals that I hope to have released later this year. So it might be more information that you wanted to know, but the point is that music has played a powerful role in my life for the bulk of my adult life. It's probably been the most consistent thing. Music and yoga. I started yoga in 1986. Music I started in 1968. So interesting numbers there. And those 2 things have probably been the most consistent practices in my life to help me to balance left and right brain, to help me to balance and find harmony in my body with the experiences that I have in my life. So I'll stop there, and that laid maybe a little foundation for what you have in mind next.
Well, that is outstanding. Many thanks. I love that in so many levels, especially the healing power of rock and roll. Let's always hear about that. The Jimi Hendrix Strat. And I will submit Jimi Hendrix Axis Bold as Love, maybe as the national anthem, if that sounds good. So we go on with that. But yeah, you mentioned the power of the spoken word, and that's perfect because, I think of sound healing like the broadest possible stroke is the multitudinous and multidimensional therapeutic and transformative applications of sound, music, voice, and vibration. So the spoken word, the language we use has profound resonances on all levels of our being, which rolls right into, as good fate would have it, the topic of your new book, The Wisdom Codes. You've got that subtitle, Ancient Words to Rewire Our Brains and Heal Our Hearts. So what are these wisdom codes and how can we begin to apply them?
Yeah, my most recent book, it's a small format book that took me over 40 years, Alec, to put together. It's actually very healing for me to bring this book together. It is called, the title is The Wisdom Codes, Ancient Words to Rewire Our Brains and Heal Our Hearts. And it's based upon the new science. I could not have written this book 40 years ago because the science did not know then what the science knows now. And that is that the words we speak not only determine how we think, and that's pretty much accepted in the common worldview as well as in the scientific literature. The words that we speak determine how we think, but they also determine what we are even capable of thinking about. The words we use determine what we are even capable of conceiving as possible in our lives. And this, I just give you a beautiful example. Andrew Newberg is a neuroscientist, and I use a quote from him as the epigraph to the beginning of the book. And what he says is a single word has the power to change the genes that influence the stress in our lives. So one word can actually upregulate or downregulate a portion of our DNA as we're responding to what life is showing us. So what it tells us is that words are more than simply words, that the words we use have a powerful influence in our worldview as well as our view of ourselves. So I just want to go back a little bit. You can't make this stuff up. This is the way the universe works. The way these understandings came about early in the 20th century, Yale University, there was a professor at Yale University who was teaching linguistics, and he took a sabbatical. He took a semester off, and he needed someone to replace him. So he invited a colleague who was not formally trained in linguistics to teach a course in native language. To teach this course, the man had to do some research into native language. The man's name was Benjamin Lee Whorf. Some people I know are familiar with that name. And the native language that he chose to explore in his course was the Hopi language. And one of the first things that he discovered about the Hopi language was that in Hopi, they have no words for anything other than the present moment. In the Hopi language, there's no word for the past, no word for the future, no word for over here or over there. Everything is present, everything is alive, everything is in the moment. So what this means, for example, if you were standing with a Hopi, if you and I, Alec, were standing with a Hopi we live in the desert Southwest. So if we were standing on a mountaintop in the high desert of northern New Mexico and we saw lightning, in Hopi, we cannot say, look at that lightning over there. What we would hear the Hopi say is, it is lightning-ing, because it is alive, it is present now. Or if we were on the beach looking at a wave, we would say the wave is waving because it is not a noun, it is happening in the moment now. And the reason this is important is because in the Hopi view of the world, and I think many people know this, as well as other native traditions, not only Hopi, there is a sense of harmony and beauty in the world. They know everything is connected, everything is alive, everything is conscious. The rock is conscious, the tree is conscious, the animals are conscious, the sky. And that harmony and that worldview, Benjamin Lee Whorf believed, is the result of the words that they use to express their relationship to the world. Now, where this gets interesting is in the English language is based in separation. There is me and you, here and there, then and now, good and bad, right and wrong, light and dark, success and failure. And so we tend to see the world and solve our problems through those kinds of thinking. There have always been words that our ancestors have used, or collections of words or phrases that they turned to in times of need, in times of loss, when they felt they needed protection, when they were in fear, that have helped them to feel differently and navigate those difficult times. Those words are preserved in their prayers, in the chants, and the Buddhist chants, the Hindu chants, the Tibetan chants, in the mantras. They are preserved on the temple walls that we see in Egypt, and on the tombs as instructions for the soul in terms of how to feel worthy enough to move into the next world. And I talk about all these in the book. So the book is a collection, a categorized collection of these ancient word codes broken down by loss and fear and protection, love and things like that. That have worked for our ancestors, and if they worked for them consistently throughout the ages, my sense is they work for us today. Some of them I've used throughout my life, such as the Navajo prayer of beauty, that reminds us that beauty already exists in all things. We don't have to create it. Our job is to find it, to seek it out, and to see the world and the events of our lives through the lens of the beauty. And that changes us. In the presence of beauty, we change the way we think, we change the way we feel. And now the science is telling us that changes the way our neurons are connecting. That in turn changes the chemistry that is released in our bodies. And we are literally changed in the presence of beauty. It's more than simply an aesthetic. So that's one example. The beauty prayer, 3 short phrases: the beauty that I live with, the beauty that I live by, the beauty upon which I base my life. I say this prayer to myself at least once a day, out loud or silently, to remind myself that the beauty already exists. I have to find it. My job is to find it in whatever the world is showing me, and that's a workshop sometimes. The beauty that I live by invites me to allow that beauty to become the lens through which I view the world, not the polarization of mainstream media or my friends, my well-meaning friends on social media who are trying to get me to back one cause or another cause or believe in something. The beauty upon which I base my life. It's an invitation for me to allow the power of beauty to become the foundation upon which I make my choices and my decisions, my interactions with other people, and how I honor myself. And that is just one example of one of the wisdom codes, the beauty prayer. And it's an example that shows how the words, changing the neurons, changing the chemistry, change us. And the beauty is we don't have to know a lot of technical science to enjoy this, although the science is there if we want to understand for ourselves why these things work the way they work. So, long answer to a short question, Alec, and I'll stop there. I could go on, but I'll stop there and see where we'd like to go from here.
Oh, brilliant stuff to consider there, because that is a truism. Probably the most powerful way to change the world is to first change yourself from within, and then your experience of the world changes, and how you show up in the world and resonate out to the world shifts. That is beautiful. Via the power of words. So, and I know there's a lot more of that in the book. I just have to refer people there. So I do just want to make a little pivot, from the power of words to words of power to the topic of intention, because in the sound healing world, the first book I discovered was Jonathan Goldman's Healing Sounds, where he puts out that formula: frequency plus intention equals healing. So, these days a lot of people are writing, teaching about intention, but for me that becomes like a thought domino of how do you begin to harness and charge intention so it's more than just mental plane wishing. So that leads us into what you talk about in the Isaiah effect, that heart and emotional content charge. Would you like to get into that for a little bit?
Well, it even goes beyond that. There is a new science emerging, Alec, that is called hope theory. And this, I think, goes directly to intention, because well-intentioned people have used intention for a long time in the only ways they understood. But what we know is that intention means different things to different people. And what the science of hope theory tells us is that it's good to have the intention, but it's not enough to have only the intention. To stack the deck of success and our failure, we need to have a strategy that allows our intention to come to fruition. And this is, it's a little bit different way for people to think, for some people possibly, but it parallels what our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have always said to us about how we see ourselves in the world and the actions that we must embrace and embody in our everyday lives that follow the image or the vision or the well-meaning that we have in our hearts. So, I have people say this to me all the time. We make a plan together. And I'll just give you a concrete example. A producer comes to me, a well-meaning, beautifully full-hearted producer, and says, let's do an event together. And I trust that this event will be a success for everyone. And I intend that this is what's going to happen. And I say, well, that's cool. It's a great place to begin. Now, earlier in my career, I assumed that those producers had the experience and knew what they were doing. And on more than one occasion, I saw them fall flat on their face, where they lost. They lost financially, they lost emotionally, they lost respect from other speakers because they intended, but they didn't follow through with a strategy so that their intention could be honored and realized. And so now when someone says to me, I intend that this is going to be an awesome event, and I said, right on, brother or sister, I intend that as well. I said, now, tell me about your strategy. And sometimes they'll say, what do you mean? And I'll say, well, in this three-dimensional world, we live in a world where the universe is going to respond to what we've put into motion. So your intention is honorable, it's beautiful, it's awesome, it's epic. And we need a strategy now in 3D to honor that beautiful vision that you have. And then that sets us on a path to develop that strategy. So this actually goes right to the level of the quantum world, and the way that information, the quantum world tells us that we live and we are a sea of information. So it's so interesting to me, because when people talk about the quantum world, and even when I go to conferences, I see world-renowned physicists doing this, Alec. They say, okay, now we know there's a field out there. There's a field that exists out there. It's been proven at the CERN superconducting super collider in Geneva, Switzerland. No doubt in their mind, there's a field out there, and look what they're doing. Out there, they're separating themselves from the field. Where's the boundary? Where the field ends and we begin. And the moment you draw that boundary, you fall into the ancient trap that keeps us separate, that keeps us powerless, because it leads us to feel and tells us that we are not part of that field. And the reality is that we are the field. Every atom of our body, your body, my body, our viewers right now, the atoms that make up the molecules of our body right now, they are emerging from that field, some of them, and some are collapsing back into that field. There's this constant dance. We are emerging and collapsing into the field. What the ancients tell us, the Buddhists tell us this so beautifully. The Sing Sing hymn, for example, in the Zen text, tells us that we are actually wrinkles. We are disturbances in an otherwise homogeneous field. And that the wrinkle of Gregg, for example, I am a wrinkle held in place by my consciousness, the way I think of myself and the way I present myself in the world. So my consciousness is what is directing those atoms as they emerge and collapse into the form of my body, into the form of my expression. And when I'm no longer in this world, I go back into that homogeneous field. So once we begin to understand that, and there's a fine line between science and poetry. I mean, it's all about the language, it's all about the words. So nature is simple, science is simple until we make it complex with complex words and mathematics. It's very, very simple. And when we begin to really, really get the simplicity of our relationship, that we are the field, then the idea of attention takes on perhaps an even new and more powerful meaning, because it tells us that first we simulate in our heart and in our mind, we simulate the potential of what it is that we want to experience. So this is the beauty of the human experience, and to the best of our knowledge, no other form of life, Alec, can do what we do. No other form of life can begin with an image, a sense of what they choose to experience, and then modify and change and hone that image and say, oh, I don't want that, but I'd like a little bit more of this, until we get it just right. We are simulating in our consciousness what it is that we choose to experience. And then it is our love for what we have simulated, or our fear of what we are simulating, that sets into motion the energy in the field that allows this event to happen. That's our intention. It's our love or our fear. And sometimes people have conscious and subconscious fears of what it is that's happening. So it gives a whole new new perspective for some people that need a little bit more of a reason to understand their relationship to the world. But our ancestors, again, our ancestors understood this so really well. Perfect. Can I just give you another example? Do we have time? Can I give you a perfect example?
Please do.
I think a lot of our viewers know there was a time in my life when Tibet was very accessible to me in a way that it is not currently. So I used to take groups into Tibet from the mid 90s to the mid 2000s. Some of you watching were probably with me on some of those journeys. We took 40 people at a time, 26-day trips, 12 monasteries, 2 nunneries, from Nepal up into the Tibetan plateau. So we had the opportunity to be in some really remote and isolated monasteries that had not been disturbed or destroyed the way some of the more accessible ones had. And one of the first things that I noticed was these beautiful mandalas that the Tibetans had in the chanting halls. And my Tibetan is terrible, so through the translator, I would ask them, what do these images mean? Sure, they're beautiful. And we've all seen the Tibetan mandalas. Some of them are the geometric shapes, the Sri Yantra, for example, or something like that. And what they told me blew me away, Alec. Now, I want you to think about this. We're talking about sound and how powerful sound is. Sometimes the sound is verbalized as a word. Sometimes the sound is created as a sound through the vocal cords, but not recognized as a word. 1,500 years ago, if you wanted to preserve that sound, how would you do that? We have no recorders, no cell phones or anything like that. But the science of cymatics gives us insight into what we're talking about here. In cymatics, C-Y-M-A-T-I-C-S, I think most of our viewers are probably familiar with cymatics, but if you're not, it is the science of pumping vibration into a substance. It can be a liquid or a powdered substance, and the vibration will create a replicable pattern in that substance. Well, what the Tibetans began to tell us is that those mandalas are the patterns from the sound that they create. And if we can create the sound in our body that creates that pattern, now we are mimicking the teachings that they left 1,500 years ago. It was a very ancient, very ingenious way for them to preserve in the teachings the powerful healing sounds. And when you go into the monasteries, there are sequences of sounds. You make this sound first, then this sound, then this sound, and the mudras that go along with those, and they're all depicted on those temple walls. So what this tells us is that the power of sound and the ability for us to create sounds that influence and change our bodies for many different reasons, whether it's for intention, as we talked about, or whether it's for healing. That knowledge has been with us for a very long time. Science is only now catching up with the mathematics and with the theory that validates and confirms what our ancestors have said to us for a very long time. So I used the Tibetan traditions as one tradition because the visual component. Here in the American Desert Southwest, our indigenous ancestors, all the native traditions all along the Front Range and down into the Sangre de Cristos and over into the Four Corners area and out into Arizona, they have very powerful oral traditions where father to son and mother to daughter and generation to generation, they pass on, they say, make exactly this sound when you do this prayer or this chant. And in that way, the tradition is carried on without the written record as they do in Tibet. So we live in a world, the field, we are the field is vibration, and we are born, we're wired with the ability to create our own vibration to influence the vibration that we find ourselves within. And I think that's what sound healing is all about. That's what this summit is really all about.